slipped in with the home market. He owned an $8 million strip mall. He sold that and bought property in Arizona that had been hit very hard by the downturn. And then when the property values went up, then he reverted back and sold all of those homes and went back into commercial property. So
Cool.
you can absolutely do that. And that's the beauty of the 1031 is that you can diversify. You can move from state to state as long as you're inside the US, and you're able to go from, you know, multiple properties and parlay that into one commercial property, or go from commercial the other way. There's actually all kinds of properties that you might not think of that fall into the 1031. For example, there was a guy with the mooring off of Catalina Island, and he wanted to sell that and buy a condominium. And he said, well, what's a mooring? A mooring is a stick in the water that you kind of, like a parking space. You can just attach your boat so it won't drift off into the water. So it was worth $250,000, and he was able to buy trade that, so do an exchange.
It's a nice stick.
Yeah, I'll take one of those, right?
I'll take 3.
Have you ever gone to Palm Springs and seen the windmills?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are a like kind. You can exchange a single family home or a condominium for a windmill. So if you have a client that's really into green energy, you know, you can get involved in that. Or billboards, they're technically an easement, but you can actually buy billboards with exchange funds. Sometimes, like the guy that the $540,000, he did have $16,000 left over, and it's like, well, you can't actually buy any real estate with that, not anymore. Not in Vegas, you know, prices have gone up. But he could have bought a billboard. And so there's other things there's oil and gas, for example. There's water rights, air rights that can be exchanged. So there was a property in New York, and that's been in the family for over 100 years. And next to it was built a huge condominium high-rise. So the owner of the high-rise didn't want the views to be obstructed of the water, so they made an offer to the owner of the lower building to buy the air rights. And you can imagine, any guess what they were able to get for the air rights?
A lot.
Yeah, about 50 million. So there's all very creative. Now sometimes, I don't know if you're familiar with, you might hear from time to time a client, especially an investor, bring up is a DST. And so those are sold by financial planners. You have to have a Series 7 or that type of thing to actually help a client with the DST. So, but it's not something that you could benefit from directly, but you can help your client when they bought a property and they don't want windmill or they don't want a billboard. They can invest in a DST, and they're able to.
What is DST?
It's a Delaware statutory trust, and it's like a REIT, but REITs aren't eligible for 1031, but they have carved out where the DST is eligible. So if you have a client and they have a fraction left over, you know, 50,000 or so, then that's an option for them to work with a financial planner and put that money into a DST and protect it under the 1031 and not have that money taxed. Because if any money is left over from an exchange, is considered boot, and boot is taxable.
So would, if you have, what is it, Series 65, can they do it, or 63, what's the other number, for financial planners?
Yeah, I'm just familiar with Series 7,
Okay.
yeah. But I could, if we fall into that, I can definitely, I have a couple people that I work with.
No, I was gonna give a shameless plug for my husband, because
Oh,
he's
all right, well, we'll have to check into that. Let me ask your husband, because I give these talks all the time, and I can give a shameless plug to your husband.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely put you in contact with him.
Okay, that'll be great. Any other questions?
If there's multiple properties involved,
Mhm.
how does the timeline change? Is it
That's-
from the, let's say we're selling 4
Yeah,
single families and gonna buy a commercial property, is it at the first close of escrow on the first single family that the 45-day period and 180-day period starts?
yeah, that would be your point of reference, because if you need all 4 of the monies to be available, so you would want them, I had a client, they actually have 160 properties, and they want to sell them and consolidate into a commercial property. So that's gonna require a lot of timing to get all of those.
Yeah.
So if you're only for maybe not so much of a headache.
Yeah.
Now, what they do have, that it's a reverse exchange. And so with the reverse exchange, if you have a time limit on the property that you're looking at acquiring and you have the liquidity, you can buy that property first. You can't hold title to them at the same time. So then there's an EAT that's set up where a title is held in a corporation, and then you can sell the other properties. But you're still in that same time frame. But if the property is sensitive time frame that you need to lock it down, then you can do something like that. So we have our forward exchange, what we've been talking about, and then you have the reverse exchange.
Gotcha.
Okay, so any other questions? Have any of you ever done a 1031? You have?
Done a few.
Oh, okay, all right. And
For clients, honestly.
for clients, okay, all right. Have you ever used IPX?
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay, well, IPX 1031 Exchange is the largest qualified intermediary in the country. We're ranked number 293rd on the Fortune list, and we're owned by Fidelity Financial Finance. And so our company is strong. We own multiple title companies across the U.S. Here in Las Vegas, we own Fidelity, Ticor, Chicago Title, and Lawyers Title. And we're in contract should close in early 2019 on Stewart Title, and we're buying that for $1.2 billion. So we're very strong, and it's important for you to understand that this area is not regulated by the government. Our company has gone and asked the FTC to put regulations in place to protect consumers, and they said it wasn't important. They weren't going to bother with it, but it is important. And so if you'll notice on the brochure, there's guarantees and protections for the security of the funds. Here in Nevada, there is a regulation to segregate the funds into a separate account. We do that, and they're insured so that if anything should happen, the transaction would go forward. About 10 years ago, when the market fell, there was an exchange company called Southwest Exchange, and they have been taking money from
I can already assume when this is gonna
right, it's not going to end well. They were taking money in from 1031 exchanges, and you can do whatever you want with the money at that time. So they just put it in the bank, and they were investing in a breast implant company in France. So when the market got soft and the exchanges slowed down and they weren't able to keep the money going out like it should and needed to, and they were forced to file bankruptcy, and the company closed. And the problem is when your money is tied up that way, you are still liable for the taxes if you are not able to complete the exchange. So even if you are able to get your money back at some point in time, it might not be within the time frame that you need, and so you're without your funds and you're liable for taxes as well. So it's important to protect yourself when you're offering this information to your clients, to put them with a reputable company like IPX 1031, very safe, strong. We have staff from the West Coast to the East Coast. We have full-time attorneys that are available that have been working in 1031 for 20, 30 decades. 20, 30 years. 2 or 3 decades. Yeah. So but this code has been around for a long time. Because people haven't heard of it, sometimes they'll think, that sounds too good to be true. But it's been around for about 100 years actually. So feel comfortable sharing this with your clients. Use it as a tool to grow your business. When you have questions, call me. But it's a pretty straightforward process. When you go, what's really important, so now you know a little bit about it, you have a client that's interested, so what's the process? You want to call me, and we'll go through some of the basics, and talk to your client, answer any questions that they have, but you need to have an executed contract and have open escrow. And so I have an exchange coordinator that I work with. Our team is in Phoenix, and they're very knowledgeable. Put them together with your escrow officer that has opened this, and they'll provide them with the preliminary title report as well as the executed contract, and then we create an agreement that is between the seller and our company. And so it's a DocuSign. We found that to be the most secure way to complete that transaction. And then the escrow officer and the exchange coordinator, they work together to make sure everything goes through smoothly and the funds are transferred to IPX. And then when they're ready, and they find a replacement property, it's the replacement period, it's 45 days, like I said, and there's different ways to identify the property. It has to be done in writing, and it has to be specific. So you can identify up to 3 properties, and you can use multiple, like where you're selling one and you're buying multiple. So you can choose up to 3 properties that will use all of your funds, or you can use the money to diversify into, like, say if you sold it for 300, you could put 100,000 on each, and then pay with the loan for the balance of the property. So you identify 3 properties, and you make that in writing to our company. You open the next escrow, and you have your executed contract, and we repeat the same process with the replacement property. So for all of that process on both sides, it's $900, and so it's just that simple, 1, 2, 3. But I hope that I answered all your questions.
What if you're an international, you're not like a US citizen?
Yeah.
You can do it. The property just has to be here, so it is
Yeah,
for
right.
foreign nationals as well.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Matter of fact, I met with a gentleman from Canada a couple months ago, and he had multiple properties here, upwards of 10 maybe, and he was interested in doing a 1031, and so they're absolutely able to do a 1031, as long as they pay taxes on their, and filed here with the government, then that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you don't have any other questions,
Thank
I'll
you.
turn this back over to Tamara.
Yes, and thank you so much for lunch. We appreciate lunch. It was delicious. Thank
Oh, good,
you.
good, I'm glad. Thank you so much.